Hey guys, welcome to another homework help session. We're going to go over tonight's homework as we always do, and hopefully we'll get cleared up for you. So, starting off, just like we have been, we're going to have two just basic computation problems at the top. The first one being a multiplication question, and the second one being a division question. Now, I want to think about multiplication as we've been talking in class today. Remember, multiplication we're saying is multiple groups of the same number. So for example, here we can either look at it as 19 groups of 375 or 375 groups of 19. Remember in multiplication, the order doesn't matter, it's commutative. So when we're looking at this here, since the order doesn't matter, I'm going to flip this around and I'm going to say 375 times 19. And again, remember the order there is not of importance. Now, when I'm thinking of this, I'm going to think of what would be an answer that would be too low and what would be an answer that would be too high. So for too low, I'm thinking, well, 375 is pretty close to 400. So I'm thinking, well, what if I had 400? And since I have 19 groups of it, what happens if I only took two groups of it? Two groups of 400 would be 800. So I know my answer has to be bigger than that because that's only two groups of a number pretty close to 375. Now keep in mind again, the reason I use 375, or the reason I use 400 is because it's a little easier to work with than 375. It's a multiple of 10, it's a multiple of 100. Now when I'm thinking of an answer, so this would be my too low answer. When I'm thinking of an answer that's too high, again, I'm thinking, well, what if this were 400? So let's do 400. And then what if this instead of 19 were 20? So 400 times 20. Now, you may not know 400 times 20 right off your head, but you might because we talked about it last week. 400 times 10. And 400 times 10, remember we can just say 400 times 1 and then add a 0 at the end. It's 4,000. And since we needed 20 groups, we'll do another 400 times 10. Which is another 4,000. And that tells us then that 400 times 20 must be 8,000. So I'm going to say 8,000 is too big because 400 times 20 is going to be bigger than 375 times 19. So I know my answer is going to be somewhere in that range. And I know that's a big range, but that helps me to figure out what kind of answer would make sense. Now, when I go to work this question, I want to remind you of the use of the zero method. Thinking, well, we have 375 times 19, so let's first do 375 times 9, and then go back and do 375 times 10. Now, the one thing I want to remember is when we go to multiplying by that tens place, don't forget to add that 0, because remember that when you're multiplying by the tens place, that you're always going to get a 0 in the ones place by multiplying by any multiple of 10. So just keep that in mind. So we're the first part. Now I'm going to let you do that you're on your own, actually. So just remember to ask yourself, does my answer make sense? It should be somewhere in that range. Right. Let's go to this division problem. 4,230 divided by 6. Now, I want to remind you, division is not commutative, so the order does matter. We're going to put 4,230 divided by 6. The number that we're dividing up always goes on the inside of that symbol. The number of groups we're dividing into always goes on the outside. Now, I generally do two things before I start a division problem, and I think it would be helpful if you guys did this too. I like to put down my place value markers, so I have a thousands, hundreds, a tens, and a ones. I know at the end that I need to have a digit in every single one of those blanks. And then I like to write down some multiples of the number I'm dividing by. So in this case, 6. So I'm going to write 6. 12, and if you're wondering how many to write, I usually write about 5. 12, 18, 4, 30. Now remember when we're thinking of this, we're thinking of how many multiples of these numbers. So this would be 1 multiple, 2 multiples, 3 multiples, 4 multiples, 5 multiples of 6. So keep that in mind. Now when I first start here, I'm going to start off in my thousands place. And I'm going to ask myself, well, I have 4 thousands, but I have 6 groups. Do I have enough thousands to give every group 1 1,000. Well, since I only have 4, my answer would be no, because I only have 4,000, but I need 6. So can I give every group 1,000? No. So I'm going to put a 0 in the thousands place. Now from here, we just move over a place value. Now I know that I have 42. Now we're in the hundreds. I have 42 hundreds. So I go over here and look, and I think, well, can I give every group 100? Well, yeah, because I have 42. Now I only have 6 groups. So I can give every 200. That would be 600. If I gave every group 200, that would be 1,200, and so on. And I'm going to notice that I'm going to need to go further here. So I'm going to go 36, 42, which is exactly what I needed. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 multiples. That's 700s per group. And if I gave 700s per group, that's going to give me 4,200s, and I've used 4,200s. So I have none left. Now we're going to split up the tens place. So we bring down my 3 tens. And we ask ourselves the same question. Can I give a 10 to every group? Ask yourselves these questions as you go through. Now remember in the end that when you get to your final answer, remember how to check your work. Remember we can take our answer here and we can multiply it by 6, and we should get whatever we started with, which in this case was 4,230. Give yourself a chance to check your answer and see if your answer makes sense, okay? We're going to talk about how to estimate a division problem next, so I'm not going to talk about it here. All right, let's take this to the power. You guys can see that. Here's what it says. It says, Mr. Thompson, me, recently found 2,472 pieces of candy in his closet. That closet over there, you know, some kids are saying there's candy in there. I'm not sure I believe it. He has decided to split. Think about that word split. The candy among 8 of his friends. All right. So I have 2,472 pieces, and I'm going to split that up among 8 of my friends. If I'm doing that, the operation of division should immediately pop in your head. So basically what we're doing is we're splitting that candy up among 8 people, or we're dividing it up among 8 people. Now, what this question in the middle is asking for is come up with an estimate that would be too low, right? And come up with one that would be too high. Because if we know that, we know what sorts of answers in the middle will make sense. Now, when I'm thinking of an estimate that is too low, I'm starting to think to myself, first off, well, would I have enough to give every person 100 pieces of candy? Well, let me check. 100, I gave every person 100. 100 times 8 is only 800 pieces of candy. So an estimate of 100 would definitely be one that is too low. I could even go further than that. I could say, what if I gave everybody 200 pieces of candy? And keep in mind, these are just kind of a guess and check. 200 pieces of candy. Well, I know that 8 times 2 is 16. I know that 8 times 2 is 16. And I'm just going to add 2 zeros only in, so that would be 1,600. So that tells me too then that an answer of 200, because it's not the same amount of pieces of candy, an answer of 200 is also too low. Just testing this out can give you a good idea of what your actual final answer is going to look like, because we're getting answers that are close. I'm going to try that one more time. I'm going to say, well, what if I gave each group 300? 300 times 8, and again, all I really need to do there is 3 times 8 is 24, and then add on 2 zeros. Again, it's smaller than this number, so 300 has to be too small. But keep in mind now we're getting to an answer that's really close. We're getting to an answer that's quite close. On the other end, so those were our too low estimates. Right, too low. On the other end, when we're thinking of estimates that are too high, too high, my first and most obvious is going to be the number that we started with. The number 2,472 has to be too high, because if I gave all 8 people this, that would be like 2,472 times 8, which is a number much bigger than the amount of candy that we have. So that answer wouldn't make any sense. So that would be an estimate that is too high. Now, if I'm even thinking lower than that, let's think, could I give every person 1,000 pieces of candy? Well, 1,000 times 8. And if you're wondering where I'm picking these numbers, I'm just picking numbers that are easy to work with. 1,000 times 8 would be 8,000, which again is more candy than we have. So I know 1,000 is also too much. Notice I'm starting to narrow down possible answers, because at this point I know that my answer has to be bigger than 300, but it has to be smaller than 1,000. We're starting to narrow down an estimate for our answer, and this is what I want you guys to be thinking as you're working through these sorts of problems. All right, that takes us, sorry about that, the last question here, and I'm going to read it to you. I'll try to put it up to the screen so you can see it as I'm reading it. So it says, Blake recently got his driver's license. They thought he was 16. He started driving for Uber and he likes it, but he doesn't like feeling like he doesn't get to exercise while he is driving. This gave him an idea. He started his own service that works like Uber, but he gives people rides on his shoulders. It is called Let's Go for a Ride. He charges $43 per second. That's $43 per second. Now, if you're not sure what that means that every second you ride on his back, you owe him $43. His first customer was Henry, who needed to go home from school one day. The ride was 2.5 minutes. How much did it cost him? So we know that he charges $43 per second, and Henry's ride was 2.5 minutes. And the question in this case is asking us, how much did it cost Henry? So how much did it cost? Again, it's important to write down the information that you know, but it's also important to know what question it is that you're trying to answer. Now, again, if we're thinking about what our information means, we know it costs $43 per second, each second. So what we need to know is, well, how many seconds did Henry ride? Well, we don't know how many seconds did Henry ride, but what we do know is we know how many minutes Henry rode. Henry rode 2.5 minutes. Now, you might remember how many seconds there are in a minute. So we know that there are 60 seconds. It's the same as 1 minute. That tells me then that in 2 minutes, there are double 60. Let's go a little bit. Double 60, which would be 120 seconds. And one easy way to figure that out is 6 plus 6 would be 12 with a 0 in the end. 120 seconds. Now, I don't want you to forget that half. Think about how many seconds are in half of a minute. We would have to add it on to this. Now, at this point, remember our question, how much did it cost? If we know how many seconds that it cost, how many seconds that he rode, and we know how much it cost for each second, we can do one of two things. We can either add $43 plus $43 plus $43 plus $43 over and over, or we can use an operation that we've been practicing a lot in class and we've already practiced once today. So I want you to think about that as you're working through that question, and see if you can answer the ultimate question. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in class today. Everybody have a really nice day.